I hadn't seen Lucas, Jamie, or Ryan in nearly 7 years. We grew up on the same block in Ann Arbor, our houses backed onto the same patch of woods, the kind kids turn into kingdoms and war zones. Life scattered us like it does. I moved to Chicago. Jamie stayed local. Lucas bounced around from one marketing job to another, and Ryan kind of disappeared for a while. We reconnected on a random group chat last winter, one of those "remember this photo" texts, and within weeks we were talking regularly again. Jamie's the one who pitched the idea. Let's do something real. Just us. No families, no phones, no obligations. He suggested camping. Said he found a spot by Lake Huron, right on the edge of a state forest. Beautiful, remote, and apparently abandoned for decades. It sounded too good to be true. Turns out it was. We left on a Friday morning in June. Michigan summers are weird. Could be sweltering one minute and jacket weather the next. But that day was clear and warm. Drove up with Ryan, who had barely said a word since we picked him up. He always had a quiet streak, but this was different. Twitchier. Eyes darting to the tree line like something was going to leap out of it. Lucas met us at a gas station near Oscoda. All jokes and bear hugs like no time had passed. Jamie showed up last in his old Tacoma, hauling a heavy-duty cooler and enough gear to outlast a zombie apocalypse. We caravanned out past the edge of town, down gravel roads with no signage until Jamie pulled off onto a narrow dirt trail and pointed through the windshield. "This is it." The trees pressed in like a curtain behind us, and the signal bars on my phone disappeared for good. The clearing was maybe 30 yards wide, nestled between thick pine and birch, with the lake glinting just through the trees. It was gorgeous, in a wild, untouched way. There were no campsites marked, no fire rings or signs, just a patch of flattened grass and the remnants of a collapsed dock maybe 50 feet from shore. Jamie said he found it on a fishing forum. Mentioned some guy whose grandfather used to own a cabin nearby. Long gone now. We set up 2 tents, me and Ryan in one, Jamie and Lucas in the other. The first few hours were exactly what I'd hoped for. Laughs, beers, dumb stories we hadn't told in years. But by dusk, the air had shifted. I know that sounds dramatic, but something in the woods felt tight, compressed, like it was listening. Ryan was the first to say something off. We were sitting around a weak little fire. Jamie managed to coax to life with damp logs when Ryan stood up suddenly, his head cocked like a dog hearing a high-pitched sound. "Someone's out there," he said, staring hard at the trees. We all went quiet, and I swear, the woods were dead silent. Not a single cricket, not a rustle. Lucas threw a pine cone into the dark and laughed, but it came out forced. "Chill, man. Just your imagination." Ryan didn't laugh. "I saw someone, tall, watching." He pointed to a patch of trees maybe 20 feet beyond our tents. There was nothing there. Jamie tried to change the subject, but Ryan didn't sit back down. He stood behind me the rest of the night, arms crossed, eyes flicking between the fire and the woods. I woke up no more than 2 hours later with that feeling, like something had tapped me on the forehead from inside a dream. The tent was hot and muggy, but what snapped me fully awake wasn't the temperature. It was the sound of zipper teeth being slowly undone, not ours. It came from outside, maybe one tent over, maybe closer. I froze, holding my breath so I could listen better. It stopped. No footsteps, no voices, just the deep, humming silence of the woods at night. I turned to Ryan. He was wide awake, eyes open, looking at me. He whispered, "Did you hear it too?" I nodded. Neither of us moved for what felt like 20 minutes. Eventually, I unzipped the tent just enough to poke my head out. Nothing. No movement, no light. But I swear I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke, faint and sharp, cutting through the pine. The next morning, Jamie's cooler was unzipped, wide open, with the lid resting beside it, like someone had lifted it gently and placed it down. Half the food was gone. Some packets of jerky, a few granola bars, and one of the beers. But none of the packaging was torn, like you'd expect from an animal. It looked neat. Ryan stood back, arms crossed, and didn't say a word. Lucas got defensive fast, accusing Ryan of sneaking food in the middle of the night. Jamie laughed it off, saying maybe a raccoon figured out zippers. I didn't say anything, but the hair on my arms stayed raised for most of breakfast. Around mid-morning, Lucas found a note, folded twice, slid under one of the tent flaps, written in pencil on a torn scrap of notebook paper. It said, "He lies. Don't trust him." No name, no handwriting we recognized. We argued for almost an hour. Ryan said it had to be one of us trying to mess with the E group. Jamie thought maybe some local kids were screwing around. Lucas wanted to leave right then, but none of our cars were close enough. We'd parked them about a mile down the trail because the clearing was too tight. Jamie convinced us to stay one more night, just to prove it was nothing. "Let's not ruin this over some spooky bullshit," he said, with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. We tried to act normal the rest of the day, swam in the lake, fished a little, passed around a flask when the sun dipped. But every so often I'd catch Ryan staring at one of us like he was doing math in his head. I asked him if he was okay while we were down at the shore, and he didn't even answer. Just shook his head slightly and kept looking at the tree line. That night, the woods felt heavier. We built the fire bigger, like it would protect us somehow. No one talked much. Even Lucas stopped cracking jokes. I could see the worry on Jamie's face too. He kept checking his watch, then glancing toward the phone. Tense, like he was expecting something to happen. Around 10, we all turned in. I didn't sleep right away. Ryan was still, but not asleep. He was facing the tent wall, whispering something too quiet for me to catch. I asked him what he said, and he flinched, then just said, "Nothing, just thinking." Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up again, this time to footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching softly in the pine needles outside. And then, whispering. Not Ryan. Someone else. A voice I didn't know. The whispering was right outside our tent. At first I thought I was dreaming again, but then I noticed Ryan sitting up, completely rigid. His silhouette was outlined by the faint moonlight filtering through the nylon. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the zipper. I didn't dare move. The voice outside was soft, raspy, and too close. I couldn't make out the words, but they came in bursts, like someone repeating a sentence over and over. Ryan leaned in and whispered, "That's not Lucas." His voice cracked when he said it. Then, as if on cue, the whispering stopped. No footsteps, just dead air. I stayed frozen, listening, waiting for something, anything. After a few minutes, Ryan laid back down, but he didn't close his eyes the rest of the night. Neither did I. The next morning, Lucas was gone. His tent was zipped shut from the outside, like he hadn't even gotten out. But inside, it was empty. His sleeping bag, his backpack, even his boots were gone. Jamie woke up just as we started checking the shoreline, thinking maybe he went for an early swim. Nothing. We split up to look, calling his name through the woods. Ryan refused to go too far from the camp. "He's not lost," he said. He left, but he wouldn't explain what he meant. An hour later, I found Lucas's boots, both of them, sitting side by side on a stump about 300 feet from camp. The laces were still tied. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just placed there like a display. We debated, going back to the cars. Jamie was starting to panic, pacing in circles and rubbing the back of his neck. Ryan just sat near the fire pit, sharpening a stick with his pocket knife. I told them we should all leave together, but the trail back was narrow and hard to follow without markers. Jamie wanted to wait until sundown in case Lucas returned, but the air felt wrong, like the forest was holding its breath. Around noon, we found a second note, folded in half, placed on top of Ryan's backpack. This one said, "One gone, 2 to go." That was it. No signature. Jamie turned white. I remember him saying, "This isn't a prank. This is something else." We didn't eat lunch. None of us had an appetite. Ryan packed his bag and said he was leaving. Just like that. Said he didn't care if Lucas came back or not. He wasn't waiting around to be next. Jamie begged him to stay, but Ryan was already heading down the path. I wanted to go with him. I really did. But something about the way he moved didn't sit right with me. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back once. Just walked into the trees and vanished from sight. Jamie and I stayed. Not because we wanted to, but because we were paralyzed by the idea of being caught alone out there. That evening, we dragged both tents closer to the fire and set up side by side. We didn't talk much. Jamie kept his flashlight on even after we laid down. I fell asleep at some point, but it was the kind of sleep where you wake up every 15 minutes, heart racing, breath shallow. I woke up to the sound of Jamie screaming, a raw, broken sound that didn't even sound like a voice at first. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and unzipped the tent in a panic. The fire was completely out. The flashlight was rolling in the dirt, casting erratic beams of light as it spun. Jamie was standing by the edge of the trees, barefoot, shaking uncontrollably. I ran to him and grabbed his shoulders, but he pushed me away and pointed. He was standing right there. He whispered, voice trembling, "Ryan, just standing." But something was wrong with his face. He dropped to his knees, like his legs just gave out. I didn't see anyone, just darkness and branches and that endless forest pressing in from all sides. I helped Jamie back to the tent, and we didn't sleep again that night. When the sun finally came up, everything looked normal, too normal, like the forest was pretending. The birds were back, chirping like nothing had happened. But Jamie was a mess. He barely spoke, just sat by the cold ashes of the fire, clutching the flashlight like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. I made the decision. I told him we were leaving, even if we had to bushwhack our way back to the cars. We packed in silence. That's when we noticed Jamie's truck keys were missing. We tore apart both tents, our bags, even checked the fire pit in case they'd somehow fallen in. Gone. Vanished. Jamie started crying, big, ugly sobs, and I just stood there, helpless. That's when we found the third note, folded in his hoodie pocket. Same handwriting. This one said, "Stay. He wants to talk." We didn't say anything after that. There was nothing to say. I had the keys to my own car, but mine was the farthest, tucked behind a locked forest gate we'd passed 2 miles back. The only spare key was in Lucas's bag, which had disappeared with him. I suggested we head to the nearest ranger station, but Jamie just kept shaking his head like that wouldn't help, like we weren't supposed to leave. I asked him what he meant, and he finally looked up at me with red, sunken eyes and said, "I don't think this is about us anymore. I think we brought something back with us when we came here, and now it's choosing." I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. It sounded like nonsense, but I felt it in my spine, that horrible knowing that maybe he was right. Around mid-afternoon, we heard someone whistling. Not a tune, just 2 notes, repeated, coming from the woods. Jamie stood up fast, almost like he recognized it. I grabbed his arm, told him not to go, but he jerked away from me and ran straight into the trees. No hesitation. Just gone. I screamed after him, ran a few steps, but there was nothing to follow. No sound, no movement. The whistling stopped the second I crossed the tree line. And then, silence. I waited for an hour, then 2. I walked the perimeter of the clearing, over and over, calling his name until my voice cracked. At some point, I gave up and sat by the fire pit, holding my own car keys like they meant something. I had never felt more alone. And the woods, they felt like they were waiting for me to do something. I don't remember making the decision to leave. I just stood up at some point and started walking. Every bone in my body was screaming to run, but I couldn't risk getting lost in that maze of trees. I followed the same trail we'd used when we came in, or at least I thought I did. Everything looked different. Trees, out of place, little landmarks missing. I passed by that same rotten stump 3 times before I realized I was walking in circles. That's when the whispering started again. Not words, just the sound of a mouth too close to your ear, barely exhaling. It came and went like wind, except there was no wind. The trees weren't moving. The air was still and heavy, like it had been holding its breath since last night. I clenched my car keys so tight they left indentations in my palm. I tried using my phone, even though I knew we hadn't had signal since day 1. It didn't turn on, not even a flicker. And the power bank I brought, empty, even though I'd barely used it. That little thing had held charge for a week back in the city. I shoved it in my pocket and kept walking. The forest got thicker, darker. My legs were shaking, either from exhaustion or fear. I couldn't tell anymore. I started talking out loud to myself, just to hear a human voice. I said my name, my age, my address. I said it over, and over like a tether to reality. My name is Ben. I live in Chicago. I work in IT. I'm 33. I have a dog named Murphy. I am not lost. I said it like a prayer, but every time I stopped, the forest seemed to lean in closer. At some point, I saw something metal glinting through the trees and nearly cried with relief. It was the ranger gate, that thick yellow bar we passed when we first drove in. I ran toward it, branches cutting my arms, tripping over roots. My car was just beyond it, covered in pine. Needles, but exactly where we left it. I unlocked it with shaking hands and threw myself inside, locking the doors before even putting the key in the ignition. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I turned the key, and for a second, just a second, the car didn't start. The dashboard lights flickered, the engine groaned, and then it roared to life. I backed out so fast I nearly clipped a tree. I didn't stop driving until I hit the main road, and even then, I didn't breathe right until I saw other cars. Again, I drove straight to a rest stop and sat there for over an hour, just staring at my hands on the steering wheel. I looked like I'd been in a fight. Dirt under my nails, scratches on my arms, dried blood on my ankle from a fall I didn't even remember. I called the police from a payphone and told them my friends were missing at a campsite near Lake Huron. They took my name and said someone would check it out, but I never heard back. I followed up 3 times, but every time I was told no. Bodies were found, no camp located. They said the area I described wasn't even on the map, and then they stopped answering my calls altogether. The following week was a blur. Coming home felt like waking up from a coma I didn't even know I was in. Murphy, my dog, stared at me as if I'd returned from another planet. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that 2-tone whistle echoing through the trees. I called the families of all of them. I lied at first, said we'd gotten separated and they were probably waiting for help. But after a few days, when nobody showed up, not even a word, I began to tell the truth, at least what I could bring myself to. The families were divided. Jamie's mother thanked me through her tears. Lucas's father called me a coward, and honestly, I didn't disagree. 2 months later, I received a letter. No return address. Old paper folded in half twice. The envelope was filthy, as if it had passed through too many hands. Inside, a single sheet, handwritten in trembling letters. You left me. I don't know who sent it. The handwriting resembled Ryan's, but it also reminded me of Lucas's. I tried to track the envelope, but the postmark was smudged. It was delivered straight to my mailbox, without passing through any system. After that, I started noticing small things. My alarm clock going off 2 minutes early every day. Footprints on the living room rug when I came home from work. The doorbell ringing at 3:17 a.m. 3 nights in a row. When I looked through the peephole, there was no one. I took it to the police. They treated me like I was having a nervous breakdown. Suggested it might be a disturbed neighbor, a teenager playing pranks. They recommended installing security cameras. I did. And on the first night at 3:17 a.m., the bell rang again. I rushed to the monitor. The camera feed was black and white, as if it had lost resolution for no reason. And there he was, standing in the middle of the street, back, turned to the camera. Tall, thin, wearing the same hoodie Ryan wore at the campsite. He didn't move, didn't turn toward the camera, just stood there for 30 seconds, then walked away slowly until he disappeared. When I went back to save the footage, the file was gone. Only one name remained on the system. Benjamin, my name. But I never entered that into the system. That's when I realized it hadn't stayed in the forest. It wasn't about the place. It was about us, about what we carried with us, or what allowed us to leave. I moved a few weeks later, changed cities, phone number, deleted all social media, took Murphy with me, told no one the truth, just said I needed a fresh start, and for a while it worked. No more notes, no whistles, no cameras failing, just silence, a cleaner, more honest silence, until that early morning. I was lying awake when I heard the sound, soft at first, then firmer. 2 distinct taps against the living room window. I live on the 2nd floor. I crept up, nodded with dread, and pulled back the curtain. There it was, a piece of paper taped to the outside glass with black tape. 3 words, nothing more. Let's go camping. I couldn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch clutching Murphy, straining to hear beyond the silence. The note was still stuck to the window, swaying gently in the pre-dawn breeze. I didn't dare remove it. I just stared until the sky began to lighten. In the morning, I went to the back of the building, used a broom to pull the note inside. The paper was damp as if it had been left in heavy dew for hours, but the tape was intact. I brought it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the words again. Let's go camping. The handwriting matched the earlier notes. Same pressure, same slight leftward slant. I'd burned the previous notes. This time I kept it. I tried to go about my day normally, but it felt like living under a silent alarm. a constant sense that something was coming. I found myself staring at the corners of the ceiling, as if something was stuck there, watching. Murphy wasn't well either. He wouldn't leave my side, barely ate, growled at the hallway even when nothing was there. When night fell, I locked every latch in the house, including a service door I never used. I added padlocks, barricaded windows with furniture, pushed the bed against the bedroom door, and yet I didn't feel safe, because deep down, I knew it wasn't the outside world that was the problem. It was what I'd brought back with me, whatever Ryan had seen or become, whatever had been watching me the moment I fled that forest. Then one night, around 3 a.m, I was jolted awake by sounds from the laundry closet. A sharp crack, like wood being forced, then a thud. Murphy was on his feet, hackles raised. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept into the hallway, heart pounding like an alarm in my chest. When I opened the laundry door, it was empty, except for one of the trip backpacks, the one Lucas had vanished with, his backpack. Same model with the rip in the side zipper he'd fixed with red tape. It wasn't there the night before. I was certain of it. I locked that door myself. I knelt slowly, touched the fabric. It was icy cold, as if placed there minutes earlier. Inside the pack were clothes folded neatly, caked in dirt as though buried underground. An expired pack of protein bars, a black lighter with LR scratched into the side, and one last item, our group photo, the one we took the first day at the lake before everything went wrong, the 4 of us smiling in front of the water. But someone had crossed it out with red ink, an X over Lucas's face, 2 slashes through Jamie's and around mine, a perfect circle. Below the image, cursive writing, "You didn't leave. You were chosen." I collapsed to the kitchen floor. Everything I thought I'd left behind had never let me go. I stayed there for hours, I think, lost track of time. When I finally tried to call the police, my line was dead. Not turned off, dead. No dial tone, no ringing, nothing. I swapped phones, tried my cell, but it froze before any call connected, like something was blocking it, but only when I tried to call for help. And that's when I began to entertain a thought I'd never allowed myself. What if the problem wasn't the forest? What if the place was just the beginning, the trigger, and whatever was around us was a sort of pact, a twisted fate? Maybe we didn't stumble upon that place by accident. Maybe we were led there, a trap, or a choice. The following days I lived in pure paranoia, slept with lights on, locked every door and window with planks, as if that could block something I couldn't even name. I saw shadows move where there was no light, smelled damp earth inside the house with every window sealed. Murphy cried at night, sometimes barked at the empty corner of the living room, just the rocking chair my grandmother once had. Then one morning I found the front door ajar, the lock still engaged from the inside. I checked myself, but the door was open. On the floor lay one item, the kitchen knife I'd used that night in the laundry, rusted, wet. I decided to leave town. It was that or lose my mind. I hit the road with minimal luggage, Murphy whining in the back seat. I left no note for anyone, no explanation at work. I just ran. Drove until the tank ran low, then crashed at a rundown motel on the state line. I tried to convince myself it was PTSD, post-traumatic stress reaction. But then, that first night outside the city, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was no voice, just the sound of the forest, clear as day, the same creaks, the same wind rustling leaves. After a few seconds, a whisper, "Come back, you're not done yet." I chucked the phone in the trash right then. I swear I tried to forget. I lived nomadically for nearly a year. Odd jobs, new places, never stayed long in one town. Avoided back roads, forests, trails, anywhere with tall trees. Never camped again, never looked at a campfire the same way. Yet still, it found me. Sometimes a note tucked under a windshield wiper. Other times, an anonymous envelope at a hotel front desk. Once, in an Airbnb, I found a protein bar identical to those from the camp, still in its wrapper, in the bottom of a drawer. The same flavor. I hadn't eaten one since the day Lucas vanished. I began to accept that there might be no escape, that whatever it was didn't want to kill me, just remind me constantly that I was still inside it. Like everything since that campsite was a disguised continuation, a kind of moving purgatory. The worst part was I started forgetting important details, day-to-day things. I forgot an old coworker's name. Once I forgot the motel room number and had to call reception pretending I'd lost my key. When he told me the room number, it was the same number as the tent I shared with Ryan that night. 22. Always had been. 22. I swear I never asked for that number. Then came the night that almost broke me. I was in a small inn in rural Minnesota. Hadn't slept well in days. Finally took something to knock me out. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of a tape recorder playing, one of those old reel-to-reel things. I didn't own one. The sound came from the bathroom. I stumbled over and flicked on the light. Nothing. No recorder. Just the voice. A clear recording of our conversation around the fire on that first night. The laughs, the jokes, even the pop of the beer can Jamie dropped. Everything as if it were being replayed. But when the tape ended, another voice blended in. Not one of ours. Low, dry, like leaves being crushed. It said, "You should have stayed." I woke on the bathroom floor. Blood from my nose, a cut on my forehead. Murphy trembling in the corner. I don't remember falling. When I looked in the mirror, someone had scratched a symbol on it in what looked like charcoal. A circle, with 4 dots around it, like the points of a compass. Exactly the same symbol carved into the tree where Ryan stopped halfway down the path. A detail I'd forgotten until that moment. I ripped a bedsheet, wiped it off, stuffed everything I could into a backpack, and left the inn in the dead of night without paying. I just wanted distance. Drove until the car nearly overheated, pulled into a gas station, thought about going to the police again. But what would I say? "Hi, there's an invisible force stalking me since a Michigan campground." Since then, the notes changed. They were no longer cryptic messages. They became personal. Recently, I got one reading, "You're not alone in the room." Another said, "He's learning to smile using your face." Sometimes just fragments. Sometimes bits of memory no one else could know, like my 4th grade teacher's name, or the color of the shirt I wore to my first kiss. Small things, but enough to churn your stomach. I started questioning everything. Was I really the last one out of that forest? Or was whoever left it not entirely me? Could there be another me, still sitting by that lake, waiting for someone to call it back? I began testing myself with simple tricks no one else would know. Hiding objects in random spots before bed to see if they'd stay put. Writing small sentences in a notebook and locking it in the glove box. Testing my memory daily. But the tests started failing. One morning I woke with a watch on my right wrist, even though, I've worn it on my left since I was a child. Another day I found a pair of shoes in the trunk that weren't mine, even though all my luggage was intact. The same style Ryan used, dark blue with frayed white laces. I started photographing everything I did, hoping it'd prove I was still myself. But even the photos began to look off. Tiny distortions, angles I didn't remember, shadows where none should be. I know how this sounds. You might think I'm on the brink of a psychotic break, and sometimes I think that too. But if it were just that, just a breakdown, why would these things continue when I'm in public? Once, at a hotel parking lot in Ohio, an attendant came up to me and asked if I had a twin. I said no. He went pale and said, "The guy who checked in yesterday, same car, same dog, looked exactly like you, but different, that he'd asked to reserve the same room as last time." I'd never been there before. I asked if he had security footage. He said yes, but the next morning, the tapes accidentally vanished. Little by little, I stopped running, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I was tired. Tired of living like I was trapped in a moving box. I started writing everything down, every detail, every sensation, every note. I thought if I left a paper trail, someone might understand. Maybe someone who'd go through this one day, someone who wandered into that same place thinking it was just a friend's camping trip. Because that's how it starts, with laughter around the fire, an odd breeze among the trees, a silence that seems to stretch too long. And suddenly, you're alone in a room, years later, unsure if you're still you, if someone else came back. Once I tried to return, I swear. I drove the route I remembered, searched for the trailhead, the path to the clearing, the sandy curve where Jamie parked the truck, but nothing existed. The forest was there, but different. Maps didn't match. The dirt road ended at a private farm gate with an electric fence. I asked a man at a nearby gas station about campsites. He looked at me like I'd made it up. No trail there in decades, he said. Land sold 20 years ago, became a hunting preserve. I showed him old photos on my phone. He just shook his head. Never seen that place in my life, brother. It was as if it had only existed for us, just so we could enter and never leave the same way. Days after that failed trip, I started getting new messages. Not notes this time, but recordings. Short audios sent to a phone number I'd never saved. I changed numbers every 3 months, yet they found me. They were always under 10 seconds. Footsteps in the forest, incomprehensible whispers, and at the end someone, or something, calling my name. Sometimes my mother called to say she'd received a package at home with my name on it, but no return address. When I asked her what was inside, it was something different each time. An old shirt, a piece of rope, a small mossy stone. Trivial items, but linked to things I remembered seeing near that clearing on night 1. I began avoiding calls, messages, social media. I lived off cash, like a ghost hiding from my own past. Still, I couldn't escape entirely. The strangest thing happened at a roadside laundromat. I found a folded piece of paper atop one of the machines. Thought someone had left it, but something made me open it. Inside was a list. My name at the top. Below it, in smaller letters, Lucas, Jamie, and Ryan. And, next to each name, one word. Taken. Except mine, which read, pending. I tore it into tiny pieces over half an hour, but it didn't help. It's not destroying what appears that matters. It's what's already embedded in you. Once I tried to get close to someone. A woman named Erin I met doing odd jobs at a rural Kansas market. She had an easy smile that seemed to pull light from people. For months, I thought maybe I could build something new. But one day, she found a package at her door. A candid photo of us having coffee on her porch. On the back, scrawled in charcoal, "He doesn't belong." She confronted me in tears, not understanding. I tried to explain, but I couldn't. The next day, she texted she'd be traveling for a while. I never saw her again. And frankly, I knew it was for the best. After that, I decided not to form attachments. No new friends, no close co-workers, no friendly neighbors. I became a shadow of myself, living in cheap motels, last-minute rentals where no one asked my full name. And Murphy, he was the only creature who still recognized who I was, or who I was fighting to be. But even he changed. Sometimes he'd growl at me, not playfully but deeply, from his throat, as if warning me of something I couldn't see. And some nights I'd wake to find him not at my feet, but sitting by the door, staring into the void, as if guarding something, or keeping it out. There was one night I'll never forget. We were in a dilapidated motel in rural South Dakota, a storm raging. Outside, rain pounding the cracked windows, that damp carpet smell permeating everything. I'd just locked the door for the 10th time that night when Murphy growled again. But this time, he wasn't facing the door. He was staring at the dresser mirror, a small, square mirror with a chipped frame. When I looked in that instant, I saw something in the reflection. It wasn't the room, not me. It was the clearing, our campsite, and 4 figures, backs turned, looking across the water. The image vanished. So fast I thought I'd imagined it. But Murphy barked that dry warning immediately thereafter, as if to say, "You saw it, so did I." From that day on, I avoided mirrors. Covered everyone with towels the moment I entered a room. Didn't want to see what might be lurking on the other side, because by then, I knew whatever it was no longer a memory. It was a presence, something I carried, or that walked alongside me, like a misaligned shadow. And it was patient, very patient. Didn't need to attack or terrify me constantly. Just being there, subtly eroding my sanity and sense of self, until I couldn't distinguish what was real from what was planted in my mind. One dawn, I woke to find something hanging on my bedroom door handle by a thin red thread. An old, heavy iron key with no tag. I swear it wasn't there the night before. Murphy wouldn't stop growling. I knew it was a message, a summons, or a trap. Unsure, I threw the key in the trash can, covered it with empty cans, and checked out immediately. Left without looking back, not wanting to discover if that key opened a door I shouldn't open. After that, something shifted, as if they, or it, grew irritated with my resistance. The appearances grew more frequent. I saw shapes move in my rearview mirror while driving. heard muffled laughter from the trunk at stoplights. Once in a storm, I looked out the car window and swear I saw Jamie, drenched, standing by the roadside, his face swollen and twisted into a forced grin. When I glanced again, he was gone. These events happened so relentlessly I could no longer ignore them. I knew I was running out of time. I decided I had to do something different. Running and hiding only seemed to make it stronger. So I confronted it in the most human, instinctive way I could, by writing. I gathered every note, every scrap I'd saved over the years, memories, details, even partial messages, and began crafting a kind of diary. Each detail of the trip, the forest, that first night, Lucas's disappearance, Ryan's watchful gaze. It felt like trying to piece together a horror film without all the footage. As I wrote, the air around me grew dense, suffocating, like I was touching on something that wanted to stay buried. Some nights the pen slipped from my hand as if pushed. Other times I heard knocking inside the walls, knocks coming not from the hallway, but from inside the room itself. Murphy paced, whining, scratching the floor as if he couldn't stand still. I knew I was pushing my limits, but I also knew stopping was worse. If I gave up, it would win. It wanted me to forget, to vanish like the others. So I kept writing, even with flickering lights, even with cold fingers brushing my neck when I concentrated too hard on certain memories. Then one night, after documenting the last memory of the clearing, my laptop shut off, simply died. Murphy barked, panicked. When the screen flicked back on, I saw, for a brief second, not the OS, but an image in black and white. Me, seated by the water, facing the lake. But behind me was a tall, thin, distorted figure, arms like jagged branches. No face, just a darker shadow within the night. The image vanished before I could screenshot or scream, and the only text left on the screen, in wobbly letters, read, "Finish what you started." In that moment I understood. Running and writing wasn't enough. I needed to close the circle. Somehow, I had to go back, not to win, because part of me knew this wasn't a fight I could win, but to end it, to give closure to this story that wouldn't die. I stayed up planning, researching how to return to Lake Huron, seeking any clue. Most trails were officially closed, but obscure forums had rumors. Fishermen and hunters spoke of a clearing where time doesn't pass right, where compasses go crazy. I knew that was it. Always knew. I prepared as if for my final journey. A small tent, survival knife, fresh batteries for the flashlight, matches, a thick notebook, and Murphy, the only being who still made me feel human. I plotted the route from old notes mixed with memories and vague forum posts. The road had no name on GPS. One access point was blocked by a rusty gate with a private property, keep out sign. I climbed over, never glanced back. Each step felt more certain than anything I'd done in years. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew I had to see with my own eyes whether it had been real, or if my madness was all in me. I walked for hours. The forest felt both familiar and alien, as if redesigned to confuse me. Trees I was sure I recognized, a mossy flat rock, the bend in the dry creek, the scent of old wood mixed with the wind's hush. Murphy led as if he knew the way. My heart finally calmed, as if my body was bracing for something inevitable. Then I reached the clearing. It was identical to that first day. Scorched grass at the center, the remnants of a dock base, the perfect circle of trees creating a silence that drowned out my own blood pulsing in my ears. I set my pack down gently, afraid any sudden move might awaken something. Murphy paused at the clearing's edge. I called him. He stayed put. I knelt, pressed my hand to the ground. It was damp, but warm like skin, as if the place were breathing. I stayed silent for minutes, recalling that last night, where Lucas sat, Jamie leaning against his pack, Ryan on watch, staring into darkness as though seeing what no one else could. Then I saw it. Me, standing on the far side of the clearing. Same clothes, same haircut, but with a smile that wasn't mine. For seconds I froze. Every muscle refused to move. Murphy barked wildly, placing himself between me and myself. Then I heard it in my own voice, layered with an echo. "You came back. Now you can finish this." The air shifted. The temperature dropped. The forest's sound vanished. All that remained was that doubled figure, stepping toward me, inch by inch. as if reclaiming something that had always belonged to it. The first thing I sensed as it approached was the smell. Not sweat, not mold. Rain-soaked tent, barely burned wood smoke, and something rotten, like meat left out in the sun. I couldn't move. It was like my muscles had shut down. Murphy howled, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Then it spoke again, echoing. They stayed. You left. Now switch. I didn't know what it meant, threat or proposition. But when it stepped closer and I saw its eyes, pupilless black wells, I understood. It wasn't me. It was what returned in my place. And now, it wanted to correct the mistake. Murphy's growl snapped me back. Instinct took over. I grabbed the knife and pointed, though I lacked conviction. The figure halted, cocked its head like a curious beast, then stepped back. Another step, as if testing me. Then it did something that chilled me to the bone. It opened its mouth and began to mimic Murphy's bark, but perfect, identical. For a moment, Murphy stopped, confused. Then it imitated Jamie's voice. Then Lucas's, then Ryan's, laughing, crying, screaming, one after the other, as if it carried their souls in itself. I didn't think. I bolted down the path, dragging Murphy. We ran harder than ever. Branches clawed my skin. The ground sucked at my boots. The air felt thick enough to choke. I dared not look back. Maybe it followed, but I refused to confirm. I just ran until I saw the farm gate in the distance, then let out the grief I'd held for years. Grief not just for fear, but guilt, because I knew I shouldn't have come back. But now it was too late. I made it to the car, started the engine, drove without thought. All I remember is the motor's roar and Murphy's panting by my side. I pulled into a station somewhere, fell asleep inside the locked car with the knife across my lap. When I woke, the world seemed normal again, but I wasn't. Not metaphorically, literally. I saw those black eyes in the rearview mirror once, but then I blinked, and it was me again. Or at least it seemed so, since then I've feared mirrors. Because sometimes, when I'm distracted, I see that smiling face staring back, and the only difference between us now is that I'm still trying to forget. From that day on, everything took on a strange filter. Colors muted, voices delayed by half a second. Even the feel of objects, mugs, doorknobs, towels, off by a fraction, as if I were touching replicas. I chalked it up to trauma, a sensory PTSD. But then I noticed people acting differently around me. The barista at my regular coffee stop stopped smiling when I entered. A former colleague abruptly blocked me online. Worst of all, my mother, my last confidant, once hung up mid-call, later texting, "You scared me today. Your voice sounded hollow." I didn't call back. Neither did she. Even Murphy changed. He'd always been attached, always slept by my side. Now he distanced himself, sleeping at the corner of the room, sometimes ignoring my calls. One night he just stood at the bathroom door for nearly an hour, silent, unblinking, then growled when I approached. Not fear, but unfamiliarity. That broke something in me. I started sleeping with lights on. Every reflection in car windows, store displays, spoons, I'd examine, trying to confirm it was me. Sometimes I thought so. Other times, no, I wasn't sure. Because there's a fear that isn't of what's outside, but of what's inside. I began rereading everything I'd written, notes, observations, accounts, and discovered consistent oddities, words I'd never used, grammar that wasn't mine, spelling mistakes I never made. It was as if parts of the text weren't written by me, or worse, I'd begun drafts and someone else finished them. Then came the worst find, a hidden audio file on my phone archive. Never seen it before. I played it. My voice, or what sounded like mine, asking someone, "Does he know yet?" Then silence. Then another voice, eerily like mine, saying, "Not yet, but he's almost ready." By now, you may wonder why I'm sharing this. Why expose myself after so long hiding? I'll answer with the only thing that still makes sense. Because I need to know if anyone else is going through this. If someone's seen their own reflection grin. If someone's found notes in places they shouldn't exist. If someone's dog hesitated before sitting close. Because if you have, maybe this isn't just my story. Maybe what we encountered at that lake wasn't an entity, but a process, a slow replacement. fragment your identity until it can't sustain itself, then occupy you. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens bit by bit when you stop fighting. Since I began writing this, things worsened. The notes came more frequently. One stuck to the bathroom mirror at the last hotel. "You're almost ready." Another in my locked pack. Not long now. Last night, as I reread this, the lights flickered thrice, and I heard a whisper behind me. "He's reading." I didn't turn. Didn't want to see what or who was there. Honestly, I fear that if I look, I'll like what I see. Because maybe it's right. Maybe I'm ready. Ready to stop fighting. Ready to let it in. But a small part of me resists. A faint spark that remembers Lucas's laugh, Jamie fumbling to light the fire, Ryan handing me the last cookie like treasure. I recall us together before the woods, before everything happened. That's why I write. Because as long as I remember who they were and who I was, maybe I can keep it at bay. Keep it from consuming everything. Because that's how it starts, right? Not with an attack, not with blood, but with silence. An extra second looking in the mirror, a planted memory, a detail out of place, like a dog that stops following you for no reason. I began printing this account, one copy in a rented safety deposit box in a city I won't name, the other scattered, in forums, anonymous mailboxes, bus stations, bookstores, on paper, because it's taught me that it can erase digital traces, but not paper. Maybe someone will find this. Maybe someone will recognize, something I describe. Maybe someone else is living this and will find answers, or solace, or at least confirmation they're not alone. If you've experienced this, if you feel watched, if you found notes you never wrote, if your reflection stares too long, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it as madness. Write it down. Stay alert. And for God's sake, do not return to the forest. Don't heed its invitations. Never ever converse with your reflection. It will mimic you, know you too well. But it's not you. If you answer it, even briefly, it may already be too late. I'm writing this now as if holding the door shut with my body while it creaks. The wood sags, and the voice beyond whispers my name, as though it already knows how this ends. I only hope that when I finish, I'm still me. Because if I'm not, then at least you, reading this, will know what's coming. Last night was the worst yet. I couldn't sleep. I stared at the hotel ceiling, hearing every creak like muffled breaths. Around 3:17. M2, always 3:17. I heard the bell 3 slow taps. I knew I shouldn't answer. Knew it was another invitation. But part of me had already given up. I rose, crossed the dark corridor, heart pounding, peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just an empty hallway. I stood there until I noticed a folded note slipping under the door. I picked it up with shaking hands. One word. Now. My throat clenched. Whatever was out there was done waiting. It wanted in. I sat on the floor by the door, knife in hand, knuckles white. Murphy, who always barked in these moments, this time huddled quietly in a corner, as though he knew there was nothing he could do. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, recalling everything I'd written, everything I'd lived, who I'd been and who I was trying to be. Then I made a choice. If it was going to happen, I wouldn't go down without a fight, even if that meant fighting the hardest thing of all, the part of me that wanted to open that door. Time crawled. Minutes felt like hours. The dawn stretched like a snapped tape. I heard nothing. No footsteps, no whispers, just my own heartbeat. When sunlight finally crept in, a thin beam across the room, I noticed the note I'd dropped in the night had changed. Instead of now, it read, "See you soon." I gathered Murphy, packed in minutes, and left without looking back. Didn't ask for an explanation. Didn't try to decipher victory or truce. Just got out, pressed forward, determined to keep fighting this slow invasion closing in each day. Now I'm in another small town where almost nobody knows me. A simple rented house on a dead-end street. No forests nearby, no lakes, just distant highway noise, neighbors mowing lawns on weekends. Sometimes I almost pretend life's normal, that my doppelganger is still back in that clearing. But in any silent night, a corner shadow, a glimmer in the glass hesitation, and I remember, this story isn't over. Maybe it never will be. Maybe I'm merely delaying the inevitable. But as long as I can write, as long as I can fight, as long as I can hold on to who I am, I will resist. A few days ago, I browsed an antique shop to kill time, to escape feeling watched. In a dusty aisle, I froze at a sight. A compass, old metal darkened with age, sides scratched. It was identical to the one Jamie carried at camp, down to the dent on the lid from when he dropped it by the lake. I held it in trembling hands. The needle spun wildly, never settling on north, just as it did that first day. I asked the shop owner where it came from. He shrugged. Some stranger left it months ago. Said it was for you. I said nothing. Paid, left, then tossed the compass in a river 20 kilometers later. Some mornings I wake with Ryan on the tip of my tongue, as if I dreamt of him but forgot. Other days it's Lucas, sometimes Jamie, always one at a time, as if they're calling me back. I suspect this was the plan from the start. It wasn't about killing or possessing. It was about replacement. Fragment your identity until it can't hold itself, then slip inside. A slow process requiring its victim to yield bit by bit. I know this now. And even resisting, I'm fragmenting. Like a photo fading at the edges. Like memory shifting color each time you recall it. I have nightmares of the clearing. Always the clearing. It morphs, a mountaintop, a drained pool bottom. But its layout is constant. 4 seats, 3 empty, 1 waiting. As I approach, the forest sounds vanish, and the thing waiting grins with my face, my eyes. I've tried to wake up screaming to avoid sleep, but the dreams return as invitations, persistent, stitched from my own history. It doesn't need to pull me. It calls me, knowing the part of me that survived still carries guilt for leaving the others. Tonight is such a night. The moon is high, sky clear, my street deathly quiet. Murphy sleeps in the corner, calmer than usual, as if even he's at peace for once. I'm writing this by hand now, on paper. I'll leave copies in multiple places, as vowed, because if one day I no longer wake as myself, or if you find me acting strange somewhere, someone must know. Someone must keep writing, must remember, because that's the first thing it tries to erase. Memory, the story, the before. It wants you to believe it was always like this, that you're it, that nothing changed. So I'm here, pen in hand, writing as though each word anchors a soul, as though every sentence postpones the final hour, as though language itself can hold me in place. Yesterday I received another letter, no return address as always, but the paper, it was that same sheet we found on Jamie's tent that second night. I'd recognize that texture anywhere. The musty smell, the singed edge, the fold exactly where Benjamin's name was handwritten. Below it, ready. I cried, harder than I have since that night in the car leaving the forest, because that word wasn't a threat or command. It was confirmation, a sentence. I was ready to be taken, or to accept that I already had been, and I'm simply narrating an ending that ended long ago. So this is it. I leave this as my final plea. Maybe a scream before the sound is gone forever. I don't know who's reading. Someone like me who returned changed, or someone still whole sensing something creeping close. In any case, hear this. If you ever wake feeling watched by something behind your eyes, don't ignore it. If you hear your name in your own voice, don't answer. If a note appears on your door with words you didn't write, burn it before you read it, because sometimes all that thing needs is a glance, a moment of doubt, and an ajar door. It's been a week since I stopped looking in mirrors. Covered them all, screens, microwaves, shop windows, anything reflective, avoided. Now I know what happens when you look too long. Sometimes it mimics you perfectly. Other times it forgets to smile or blinks too quickly, or a scornful expression slips out, one I'd never wear. An inchu, those moments I understand. It no longer hides. It's winning space, invading gradually. A gesture here, a thought there, a silence before responding to someone calling your name. There are details I'm no longer sure were real. The smell of damp earth, Lucas's laugh, the pop of the beer can. I recount them like lines I heard someone else speak, as if they weren't truly mine. That terrifies me more than any note or mirrored reflection, because the real horror isn't watching it approach. It's realizing it's already arrived and you're the last to notice. And right now, I think I'm at that stage. Recognizing the space left for me is vanishing. Today I found a new note inside the fridge, folded between 2 water bottles. A taunt. You can flee the forest, but not the home you live in. It read, he is already you. Not he will be, not he wants to be, he is. I read it 10 times before I could breathe. I managed only because Murphy, for the first time in days, came to me, pressed his head to my knee and stayed, quietly, as if bidding goodbye, as if he knew my time was up. I hugged him tight, and for the first time in ages, I cried without fighting it, not from fear, but mourning the version of me I knew was gone. So here, in this moment, I write my last lines. I don't know if anyone will find this, if it will make sense to someone who never set foot in a remote clearing, but if you're out there, whole and intact, someone who still recognizes their own face, please, avoid unmapped trails. Don't accept old friends' invites to reconnect. Above all, distrust familiarity when everything around feels wrong, because the thing that calls your name might have called yours before, and it's waiting for you to smile back. Last night, the bathroom mirror I'd taped up fell, intact with no crack or crash, as if carefully removed, and lay face up against the wall. I knew it was time. I approached slowly, Murphy behind me, uneasy, but silent. I knelt and for the first time in months, met my reflection eye to eye. It appeared me, but not quite. The eyes no longer hurried to hide. They gazed patiently, as though triumphant. I stood feeling a calm I hadn't known since before the camp. Scooped Murphy in my arms. He didn't resist, only nestled deeper against me, as if sensing the change. I closed the bathroom door, walked to the window. The sky was clear, nothing stirring, and for the first time I didn't expect a warning. No more notes, no twisted reflections. The process was complete. The cycle closed. I sat on the bed, opened my notebook, read the first page I wrote months ago, barely recognized those words. They belonged to someone who still believed they could escape, who thought they could tell this story without being consumed by it. But the truth is, if you've read this far, it's too late, because now this story is yours too. It seeped in through your eyes and your doubts. It will visit your dreams, whisper your name when you're alone. It will make you hesitate before the mirror even for a second, and that second is its foothold. So my final advice, burn this. Delete this file, discard this notebook, because if you try to share it, it will know. And it will follow you too, as it followed me, as it follows countless others who never returned from that clearing. If tomorrow I wake and no longer remember writing this, maybe someone can remind me. But if my voice sounds off, if my gaze seems distant, if I smile when nothing's funny, please, let me go. Let me vanish quietly, because perhaps whatever remains of me is only here to ensure you know what's coming. And when it comes, you'll understand, you'll feel it, and you'll wish you'd never read to the end.